Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Welcome to part 16 of my review of RuneQuest Glorantha by Chaosium. In this video we will look at the third type of magic available on Glorantha, Sorcery. On Glorantha, sorcerers see an impersonal universe of immutable laws, and sorcery uses manipulation of these laws to create a desired effect. It does not require gods or spirits. It is described as being the most conceptually flexible and potentially the most powerful form of magic, with the idea of vast amounts of magic points being spent to increase the range, duration and strength of spells. It talks about the God Learners, those sorcerers that during the Second Age studied the relationships between the runes, resulting in extremely powerful spells and often using collectives of sorcerers to cast spells far beyond the ability of the individual. They conquered much of Glorantha, though their overreach led to their downfall. The Malchioni religion to the west of Dragon Pass predominantly uses sorcery, and it is feared everywhere else due to the meddling of the God Learners. Despite this fear, they can be found in Cathala, the Lunar Empire, and in the Lancor Might cult of Dragon Pass. This chapter gives a bare-bones overview. Gloranthan sorcery uses complex formulae to manipulate the runes by using one or more techniques. It is stressed that a sorcerer's understanding of a rune is not based on their affinity and is also not a skill. It is understood enough to manipulate it. Sorcerers divide the runes into elemental, power and form runes, which is similar to personal rune affinities. Their understanding of a rune is impersonal and rational and has no personality or psychological implications. For example, a sorcerer can manipulate both the truth and illusion runes without penalty, though obviously what they actually do with the magic that it provides can have implications on personal rune affinities. All sorcerers start with mastery of at least one rune, as described in the Philosopher occupation. It then moves on to discuss the runes themselves. The importance of the magic rune is discussed here. It indicates the connection between the mortal world and the eternal god time. It is different from the other runes in that it is a condition, not a constituent part. It is studied to master the art of magic. It then goes on to discuss the elemental runes. These are arranged in a pentagram called Zabur's Sigil, with each rune connected to two others. These others are considered the minor runes. Knowledge of an elemental rune gives a certain amount of knowledge about its minor runes. Sorcerers can learn spells using their minor runes, though these cost double the number of magic points to cast. It also makes mention that the moon rune has no minor runic associations. The God Learners had doubted that the moon rune belonged to the elemental runes. It then talks about the power runes. As previously noted, these runes are arranged in opposite pairs, and their arrangement grants sorcerers knowledge as per the minor elemental runes. It talks briefly about the form runes, those that are independent and autonomous. We have another part of Vasana's saga, and then we move on to techniques. There are 6 techniques in sorcery: command, combine, separate, summon, dispel, and tap. These are not skills that need to be rolled under. Sorcerers understand them enough to manipulate them. 4 of the 6 are arranged into 2 sets of pairs, and as per the runes, knowledge of one technique implies some knowledge of its opposite with the associated double magic point cost. The techniques of command and tap are implied in all other techniques. If a sorcerer masters any one of these techniques, they can learn spells using any other technique at double the magic point cost. The command technique forces a manifestation of a rune in specific accordance with its nature. Combine forces a specific manifestation to combine with that of a different specified rune and is the opposite of separate. Dispel allows the sorcerer to dismiss specific manifestations of a rune and is the opposite of summon. Separate forces a manifestation of a rune to remove itself from a different specified rune and is the opposite of dispel. And finally, tap allows the sorcerer to transform the manifestation of a rune into raw energy that they can then use. All sorcerers start by mastering one rune and one technique. They must have a minimum int of 13 to do this. For each point of int above 13, they can learn one more rune or technique. Thus, a sorcerer with int 18 could know up to 7 other combinations of runes and techniques. Mastering a new rune means achieving intellectual union with the source of their magic, be that the invisible god, the great mind, logic, or whatever their philosophy is, and they make an int plus power roll on a d100. This can be augmented through ritual practices. If the roll is successful, then the sorcerer sacrifices a point of power to master the rune or technique, with only one attempt being able to be made each season. Once mastered, they cannot be unmastered. Next, we move on to manipulating spells. Sorcerers have something called free int. That is a value equal to their int minus the number of points of sorcery and spirit magic possessed. They cannot cast a spell that needs more free int than they have. First up is intensity. This governs the strength, range and duration of a spell, and all sorcery spells have an automatic intensity of 1 in all parameters. If the sorcerer spends a magic point, they can increase one of these categories by 1 level. So for example, if someone wanted to cast Conflagration, which begins with strength, range and duration of 1, and wanted to increase the strength to 8, they would need to spend an additional 7 magic points. All spells, unless specified, cost an additional 1 magic point to increase the intensity by 1 level, or double that if it's a rune or technique that has not been mastered. Spells can only be manipulated up to the limit of the sorcerer's free int at the rate of 1 point per strength, range or duration. It gives us the tables of intensity 1 to 20 for strength, range and duration, alongside the increase to damage, range and duration with the magic point cost at mastered and unmastered. As you can see, an intensity 20 range can target something 100 kilometers away, and an intensity 20 duration can make a spell last 8 years. To cast a spell, a sorcerer goes into a semi-trance focusing on the rune they want to affect and allow their subconscious to use the manipulation technique. The magic points are spent and the arcane technique exerts a psychic force which creates the desired effect. Each spell is a skill with a percentage chance of casting it. This percentage is modified by the magic skills modifier. Each spell has 1 or more runes that are manipulated by a technique which the sorcerer needs to have mastered to cast at the normal magic point cost. Spells cost a minimum of 1 magic point per rune or technique in the spell. Each additional magic point adds to the intensity, either the range, the strength or the duration. An unmastered rune or technique costs double the magic points, and if it's a rune and technique that they have not mastered, the magic point cost is multiplied by 4. Sorcery, by its nature, is much slower to cast than spirit or rune magic, with spells taking a full melee round to cast, taking effect on the dexterity strike rank of the following round, with a +2 strike rank per additional magic point used in the spell. If the strike rank of a spell exceeds the number of strike ranks in the round, i.e. 12, it goes into effect the following round minus 12 strike ranks, so 2 full melee rounds will pass before anything happens. Upon finishing the end of the casting, the sorcerer rolls d100 with the aim of being under the sorcery spell percentage. This percentage can be altered by the meditate skill, ritual practices, time, place and even item bonuses, in addition to the pertinent rune affinities or passions. If successful, the magic points are marked off and the spell takes effect. If they fail, a single magic point is lost and it has no effect. If it's a critical, the entire spell only costs 1 magic point. If it's a fumble, it fails and costs the entire amount of magic points. Sorcerers cannot attack, parry or dodge when spellcasting. If they take damage, then they need to roll int ×3 to maintain concentration. If their concentration is broken, then the spell is aborted with 0 magic point cost. Spells can be boosted to overcome defensive magic, increasing the casting time by 2 strike ranks per additional magic point in the spell. If the sorcerer aborts the spell themselves, then it costs 1 magic point. Some spells cannot be cast on the same target if they have an incompatible spell on them. If this is the case, then the spell with the greatest magic point value takes effect. If they are equal, the pre-existing spell remains. Sorcerers also have Sympathetic Magic that increases their chance of casting a spell. They get bonuses based on rune-appropriate times, places and components. Each day, week and season has a runic association as detailed in this table here. Bonuses are cumulative. Each day of the week gives a +10% chance of casting if the rune is specific to that day. Differing elemental runes have a -10% to the chance of casting. This is exactly the same for the week, and the rune-appropriate season gives a +5% to the casting and a -15% penalty to those of differing elemental runes. In addition to this, some places can provide bonuses and penalties for casting associated spells. The more powerful or legendary these places, the bigger the bonus or penalty. It gives some examples of minor, major and great runic associations, with minor places giving a +10% and great places giving a +30%. If mundane but related components are used, these grant a +10% bonus, with magically related objects giving up to a 20% bonus. These are detailed earlier on in the book. Next, we move on to how you actually learn sorcery. Essentially, sorcerers are not born that way. They need to have training, and it is a literate discipline. They cannot know a spell better than their read-write skill. They usually begin their training at 5 to 6 years old. It gives us a few pertinent examples. The first is the Malchioni. They worship the invisible god and use sorcery as their primary magic, generally not using rune spells, though many use spirit magic. Their society has 4 castes: Dromal or worker, Horal or soldier, Talar or noble, and Zaburi or sorcerer. In the Rokari sect of Malchiones, a child with an int of 16 may be selected at 5 years old to train as an apprentice sorcerer. At this age they select 3 runes, the spirit rune, an elemental rune, and either a power rune or the magic rune, as well as 2 techniques, command and 1 other, and then they devote 5 years or more to mastering them. Once this is done, they confer the status of Zaburi. The Malchioni learn the Worship Invisible God magical skill, which allows them to use a portion of the magic points generated by all the worshippers in the weekly ceremony. A portion of these magic points are passed up the chain of veneration to the Zaburi's Watcher. This caste restriction provides a bonus to the use of sorcery, and once it is violated, that bonus is lost forever. The second method of learning is Aeolian Ism. This is a sorcerous tradition found in Cathala. Unlike the Malchioni, the Aeolians don't worship the invisible god, and instead worship the Lightbringers, Orlanth, Shalana Arroy, Isares, Lankomai and Urmal, as personifications of the Creator, with Orlanth being the most important. Their caste system is free or commoners, Talar or nobles, and wizards or sorcerers. The free and Talar use rune and spirit magic only. Children are taught from age 6 the mind training techniques, and at 14 they select 2 runes and 1 technique in which to specialise, spending the next 5 years mastering them. At age 21 they are granted the title Wizard. The third method is the worship of Lankomai. Apprentice scribes are taught logical reasoning and wisdom literature and begin their studies between 6 and 15. They are taught the Truth Rune and Command Technique, with additional runes and techniques being learnable if they find an appropriate book or teacher. The cult teaches a limited amount of sorcery spells from a collection of documents called the Torvald Fragments, though not every temple possesses these spells. The fourth method listed is Lunar Sorcery. There are numerous schools of sorcery within the Empire that are typically based on the moon, fire/sky and darkness runes. All of the power runes are known to lunar sorcerers, as well as the Chaos Rune. Moon rune spells are subject to the lunar cycle, with full moon days costing half the number of magic points, including increasing the intensity, and dying moon days costing double, with half moon days being normal cost and crescent moon days costing half again the magic points cost. We then move on to learning new spells. There are various methods such as another sorcerer, books, scrolls and the like, and learning a spell from a teacher takes an entire season of study with minimal other activity, the same as with any other skill. They cost 50 lunars for common spells and more for rarer or cult spells. At the end of the training, they've learned the spell at D6 plus their magic skill bonus. Researching a spell takes a season, in which they must first make a read-write roll for the source, then an int times 3. If both are successful, they've learned the spell at D6 plus the magic skill bonus. If they fail, they must repeat the entire procedure. Sorcerers can never know more sorcery than they have int, with each point of sorcery taking up a point of free int. Spirit magic similarly takes up int. As a result, some sorcerers forego spirit magic entirely. Most sorcerers learn memorization techniques that allow them to essentially forget active spell knowledge by placing it in a recess of their memory. This takes about an hour and is successful with a meditation roll. The spell can be recalled through meditation, taking about 3 hours and a successful meditate roll, though they must have enough free int to hold it. Sorcerer's spell knowledge can be inscribed in items, books, scrolls, jewellery and the like, and kept instead of using free int. This involves sacrificing a point of power to create the inscription. For each point of power, the base strength, range or duration is increased by 1, allowing them to create spells with a greater intensity than their free int would allow. Gives some specific rules on creating new spells by combining runes and techniques that are already mastered, though they are generally weaker than a comparable spirit magic spell and half as strong as a comparable rune spell. As always, the GM has final authority. Researching a new spell takes a season, and the difficulty of the spell determines the chance of success in this table here. On a success, the new spell is created and can be memorised, written down and taught. On a critical success, the GM can add some additional twist to the spell. Sorcerers increase their skill in sorcery through experience, training or research. After this we have some sample sorcery spells that might be known in the Dragon Pass region. Before looking at the spells, it's worth going over the parameters. Each spell has the runes and techniques listed, with the magic runing indicating that any rune can be used to cast it. It lists the minimum magic points required, with those ritual spells having the power cost listed, and where appropriate it has the range, type and duration. The spell description includes the area of effect, the resistance roll required and the like. So for example, Animate Dead requires the mastery of the Death or Fertility rune, as they are opposing as an insight, and uses the Combine and Command techniques. This could be viewed as needing the Death rune to affect the dead, the Fertility rune to give it vitality, the Combine technique to merge the two, and the Command in order to instruct the undead. Similarly, Attract Missiles uses the Air and Movement runes, and the Combine and Command techniques. This breaks down into using the air and movement to represent the missiles, the Combine to merge the two runes, and the Command in order to tell them to hit something else. Once the spells are broken down into their runes and techniques, they become fairly easy to unravel. Each of the spells has a variety of other parameters such as ranged, active, temporal, ritual and the like. These were explained earlier in the book. Now, without going over each spell individually, it's worth seeing the kind of things that sorcery does. Sorcery has various attract and bind spells that affect spirits, magic, missiles, elementals and the like, and there are others that are based around illusions such as create odour, create sensation, create sound and create taste, which are fabrications of reality. There are a number of dominate spells that affect the likes of spirits, elementals and the like, but the dominate humanoid spell has to be specific to the kind of humanoid you want to dominate. For example, dominate human requires at least half the magic points of the target, and it can be used as dominate centaur but requires the full amount. There are a number of spells associated with gaining insight or knowledge, such as Geomancy, Pierce Veil, and Identify Spell, and a number of them are used with waterborne vessels such as Rogue Wave and Hasten Vessel. Some of the spells deal with calmness of the mind, such as Logical Clarity and Logician, and it has healing spells such as Mend Flesh and Accelerate Healing. There are spells used to bypass things such as Neutralize Armour, Neutralize Magic and Neutralize Rune, and we even have the Open Sea spell, which is used to allow ships to sail the oceans after the closing. There are various warding and protection spells such as Protection Circle, Solace of the Logical Mind and Spirit Warding, as well as spells that summon species, and we have the Tap Body spell, which allows the sorcerer to drain the size stat of someone to fuel themselves with magic points. Okay, that concludes part 16 of this series of videos and my overview of sorcery. The 17th video in this series will be the chapter called Equipment and Wealth.